Marcus's laughter echoed off the cold marble walls, a sound of pure arrogance as he signed the divorce papers. He thought he was discarding a useless housewife with a few pennies. He had no idea the woman sitting opposite him, me, was the financial ghost holding 60% of his company's debt. When the mediator read my net worth aloud, his smile didn't just fade, it shattered into absolute terror. He wasn't divorcing a wife. He was declaring war on his biggest creditor. My name is Elena Vance, and for the last hour, I had been treated less like a human being and more like an expired appliance that needed to be hauled away. We were sitting in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of a prestigious law firm in downtown Seattle. Outside, the gray sky wept a steady drizzle against the pane, but inside, the air was dry and smelled of expensive cologne and leather polish. Marcus Thorne, my husband of 6 years and the 36-year-old CEO of Ether Systems, was leaning back in his chair, laughing at something his lawyer had just whispered. I sat perfectly still on the opposite side of the mahogany table. I wore a charcoal gray turtleneck and black trousers, unadorned and functional. My hair was pulled back into a severe bun. In contrast, Marcus was a riot of noise and expensive fabrics. He wore a midnight blue Italian suit that cost more than the average car, and his gestures were wide and sweeping, designed to take up as much space as possible. He looked at me, his eyes crinkling not with warmth, but with amusement. "Come on, Sterling," Marcus said, his voice booming in the quiet room. "Let's wrap this up. I have a tea time at 1 o'clock with the investors. Look at her." He gestured vaguely in my direction with a gold fountain pen. "She is overwhelmed. She is probably worried about how she is going to replace that sad little purse once the credit cards are cut." He sneered at the leather bag resting against the leg of my chair. It was vintage, weathered and soft. But to Marcus, anything that didn't scream a brand name was garbage. "Listen, Elena, I am feeling generous today. I will give you a check for $15,000. Right now, consider it a severance package for services rendered. It is more than you would make in a year doing whatever it is you think you can do." His lawyer, Mr. Sterling, a man with a smile that never quite reached his predatory eyes, nodded in agreement. "It is a very generous offer, Mrs. Thorne. Frankly, with no employment history for the last 5 years and a prenup that, well, let us just say it is airtight. You should take the money and sign. We do not want to drag this out, do we? Marcus is a busy man." I felt a sharp spike of anger in my chest, hot and acidic, but I forced it down. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second and summoned the image of Leo. My 5-year-old son was at preschool right now, probably covered in finger paint and laughing with his friends. He was the only reason I had endured the last few years of neglect. For Leo, I would be a statue. For Leo, I would be a ghost. I opened my eyes and looked at the mediator, ignoring the 2 men entirely. The mediator, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Gable with silver hair and patience that was clearly wearing thin, cleared her throat. "Before we proceed to any signing," she stated, her voice flat and professional, "we must complete the mandatory financial disclosure. State law requires full transparency of assets and liabilities from both parties immediately prior to the dissolution of marriage." Marcus let out a loud, incredulous laugh. He tossed a thin blue folder onto the polished table. It slid across the surface and stopped near the center. "There, my financials." "Not that she understands equity splits or vesting schedules. And her—" He pointed at me again, his finger stabbing the air accusingly. "She has nothing to disclose, Mrs. Gable, unless you want to audit her collection of clipped coupons and casserole recipes. Just skip it. This is a waste of time." I did not speak. I simply reached down into my bag and withdrew a heavy, cream-colored envelope. It was thick, almost an inch deep, and sealed with the red wax emblem of a private Swiss bank, crossed with the tamper-proof tape of a forensic accounting firm. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air conditioning hummed, sounding suddenly loud. I placed the envelope on the table. With 2 fingers, I slid it slowly, deliberately, across the mahogany until it rested directly in front of Mrs. Gable. Marcus stared at the envelope. For a second, a flicker of genuine confusion crossed his face, but his ego quickly paved over it. He leaned forward, a smirk returning to his lips. "What is this?" he scoffed. "A love letter, a list of demands. Please tell me you did not write a poem. Elena, it is too late for that. Really, it is pathetic." Mrs. Gable ignored him. She picked up the envelope, feeling its substantial weight in her hands. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses, and I gave a single, barely perceptible nod. She reached for her silver letter opener. She slid the blade under the flap and sliced it open. The sound of the thick paper tearing was sharp and violent, like a knife severing the last thread that held Marcus's reality together. The sound of paper tearing was sharp, but the memory it invoked was dull and aching, dragging me back 6 months to the Ether Systems charity gala. It was a night that was supposed to celebrate the company's success, but for me, it was the night the illusion of my marriage finally dissolved under the harsh glare of crystal chandeliers. The ballroom was suffocatingly warm, filled with the scent of lilies and ambition. I remembered standing next to Marcus, smiling until my jaw ached as the photographers swarmed. Just as the flashes began to pop, Marcus nudged me, not gently, but with a stiff arm to my waist. "Step aside, Elena," he muttered through a fixed smile. "They want the management team. You are just crowding the frame." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the hem of my gown, as he wrapped an arm around his CFO and beamed at the camera. When a reporter asked who I was, Marcus didn't even look at me. "Oh, that is Elena. She handles the domestic logistics, keeps the fridge stocked. You know." The laughter that followed felt like a physical blow. I retreated to our table, only to be intercepted by Patricia, Marcus's mother. She was a woman who wore her pearls like armor and her judgment like a weapon. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my dress, which was elegant but understated. "Still dressing like a librarian." "I see," Patricia said, taking a sip of her champagne. "I suppose one cannot breed out the commoner instincts. It is a pity Marcus needs a partner with a bit more pedigree to navigate these waters." I bit my tongue, the taste of iron filling my mouth. If only she knew that my common family could buy and sell her social circle 3 times over. I sat alone at the table, picking at a napkin, while Marcus held court with a group of male investors a few feet away. He didn't think I could hear him over the jazz band. Or perhaps he just didn't care. "Marriage is complicated," Marcus was saying, swirling his scotch. "Honestly, she is a dead weight. I have this vision, this drive to expand Ether into Asian markets, and she asks me about grocery budgets. It is stifling. A man needs a muse, not a maid." That was when Isabella appeared. She was the new marketing director, 25 years old, with ambition that burned brighter than her sequined dress. She walked up to our table, and the way Marcus looked at her with a hunger and admiration he hadn't shown me in years made my stomach turn. "Mrs. Thorne," Isabella said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness as she leaned in to greet me. "It is so lovely to finally meet the woman behind the scenes." As she pulled back, her hand accidentally jerked, sending a full glass of red wine cascading down the front of my pale gown. The cold liquid soaked through to my skin instantly. "Oh my God," Isabella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I am so clumsy. I am so sorry." I stood up, trembling, expecting Marcus to help me, to offer his jacket, to do anything a husband should do. Instead, he groaned, rolling his eyes. "For God's sake, Elena," Marcus snapped. Why are you always in the way? You have ruined the mood. Go clean yourself up before you embarrass me further. Humiliation burned hotter than the wine. I fled to the restroom, locking myself in a stall to dab uselessly at the stain. Moments later, the door opened, and I heard the click of heels followed by Isabella's voice. She was on the phone. No, he is completely wrapped around my finger. Isabella laughed, the sound echoing off the tiles. The wife, please. She is a total doormat. He told me he is sick of her. Give it a few months. I will be the one on his arm at the next gala, and the penthouse will be mine. I stayed in that stall until they left, shaking not from cold, but from rage. When I finally emerged and made my way to the exit, I saw Marcus and Isabella getting into his limousine. Isabella had too much to drink. Marcus called out to me through the rolled-down window, not even bothering to look me in the eye. I have to make sure she gets home safely. You can take a cab. Right, do not wait up. Sss. The car sped off, leaving me standing on the curb as the Seattle rain began to fall, washing the wine stain into a muddy blur. I took a taxi home, the silence in the back seat deafening. When I walked into Leo's room, he was fast asleep, clutching his teddy bear. I didn't cry. I stared at my son's peaceful face and felt a terrifying, icy calm settle over my heart. That night, looking at Leo, I realized the truth. My love for Marcus was dead, killed by 1,000 small cuts. But more importantly, I realized that Marcus's respect for me was directly calculated by the amount of money he thought I brought to the table. He thought that number was 0. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The morning after the gala, the blindfold was off. I did not just sit and stew in my misery. I went to work. Marcus had forgotten, or perhaps he never truly cared to know, that before I was his wife, I was a predator in the financial waters. I dusted off skills I had not used since Leo was born and logged into our accounts. He thought changing a password would stop me, but he used the same variation of his birthday for everything. It took me less than 10 minutes to breach his digital fortress. What I found was not just negligence, it was systematic looting. I started with the joint account. For months, he had been transferring cash out, telling me that the company was reinvesting and that we needed to tighten our belts. But the bank statements told a different story. While he preached austerity to me, there were transfers to a high-end jeweler in Bellevue and a substantial deposit at a luxury car dealership. Then came the credit card statements. The week he claimed to be grinding through meetings in Silicon Valley, the charges were from a 5-star resort in Maui, couples massages, champagne dinners, suite upgrades. But the biggest blow came when I checked his retirement fund. I saw a withdrawal of $200,000 made 3 months ago. I tracked the transaction code. He had dumped the entire sum into a speculative cryptocurrency that had crashed weeks later. The money was gone, vaporized. That evening, Marcus came home looking the picture of the martyred provider. He loosened his tie and slumped onto the sofa, sighing loudly. God, the pressure is unrelenting. He groaned, rubbing his temples. The market is brutal right now, Elena. We need to cut back. I saw the grocery receipt on the counter. Do we really need the organic milk for Leo? It is just wasteful. I stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at the back of his head. He had blown $200,000 on a digital gamble and spent thousands on a mistress in Hawaii. Yet he was lecturing me about a $6 carton of milk. I will keep that in mind, I said, my voice steady despite the rage vibrating in my fingertips. You do that. He dismissed me with a wave of his hand. I am going to shower. Do not touch my tablet. I have sensitive files open. He left the tablet on the coffee table, screen unlocked. It was an insult to my intelligence. As soon as the shower turned on, I picked it up. I did not just look. I installed a mirror program that would forward every keystroke, every message, and every file directly to my secure server. Over the next few days, the picture became terrifyingly clear. I sat in my home office, watching the chat logs between Marcus and Isabella scroll across my screen in real time. It was not just a sordid affair. It was a conspiracy. "The shell company is set up," Isabella had texted. "We can funnel the bonus checks there. If you buy the penthouse under Project Orion, she will not be able to touch it in the divorce." "Good," Marcus had replied. "I am done with her. I just need to make sure I get full custody of Leo. My lawyers say if I paint her as unstable and unemployed, I can win. It looks better for the brand if I am the devoted single father. And her," Isabella asked. "She gets nothing," Marcus wrote back. "She can go back to whatever hole she crawled out of." I read the words over and over. He did not just want to leave me. He wanted to erase me. He wanted to steal my son to polish his public image while leaving me destitute. I closed the laptop, a cold resolve hardening in my chest. He wanted a war. He had absolutely no idea who he was fighting. Marcus saw a woman who clipped coupons because she had to. He never understood that I clipped them because I was raised to understand the value of $1. No matter how many billions of them sat in the family trust, I was not the poor girl from nowhere that Marcus had constructed in his mind to feed his savior complex. I was the only granddaughter of Silas Vance, the East Coast real estate tycoon who had reshaped the Manhattan skyline. My grandfather had not taught me how to bake cookies. He had taught me how to read a balance sheet when I was 10 years old. I had hidden my background for a simple, naive reason. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the Vance empire. I wanted a life that was not defined by quarterly earnings and board meetings. I thought I had found that with Marcus. I thought I had found a partner. Instead, I had found a leech who mistook my humility for weakness. For the past 5 years, while Marcus thought I was napping or watching soap operas while Leo was at preschool, I was actually working. My home office, which Marcus jokingly called my craft room, was the nerve center of Aurora Holdings, a private equity firm I had established before we even met. In the tech world, I was not known as Elena Thorne, the housewife. I was known as EV, the elusive angel investor whose approval could make a startup and whose rejection could break one. The irony was rich enough to choke on. I opened my secure laptop and pulled up my business email. There, sitting in the inbox, were a dozen desperate emails from Marcus himself, addressed to EV, begging for a meeting, begging for capital. "Dear EV," one read, "Ether Systems is on the verge of a breakthrough." "Pathetic," I whispered to the empty room. I picked up the phone and dialed a number that I had not called in years. It rang twice before a sharp, familiar voice answered. "Elena," the voice said, "I was wondering when you would finally call. I saw the stock dip for Ether. Is he dragging you down?" "Hello, Sarah," I said, feeling a wave of relief. Sarah was my family's personal attorney, a shark who made other lawyers look like goldfish. He is filing for divorce. He wants full custody, and he is hiding assets." "He is playing with fire," Sarah replied, her tone dropping an octave. "I will have a forensic team on his accounts by noon. Send me what you have." 2 days later, Sarah and I sat in my kitchen, reviewing the dossier she had compiled. The situation was worse than I thought. Marcus was not just spending money, he was hemorrhaging it. But amidst the red ink, Sarah pointed to a massive liability on Ether Systems' balance sheet. "Look at this!" "Elena," Sarah said, tapping the paper. "Ether is insolvent. He is floating on a bridge loan of $15 million that is due in full in 30 days. If the creditor calls that debt, he is finished." I leaned in, squinting at the name of the creditor holding the loan. Obsidian Capital. My heart skipped a beat, and then a slow, cold smile spread across my face. Marcus was so busy playing CEO that he had not done his due diligence. He did not know who owned Obsidian Capital. "Obsidian is a subsidiary of Aurora Holdings," I said softly. Sarah looked at me, her eyes widening. "Wait, are you saying—" I am saying that I own his debt, I cut in. I am his biggest creditor. Through the fund, I hold the note on his entire company. If he defaults, or if the company's stability is threatened, say, by a CEO involved in an embezzlement scandal, I have the right to call the loan immediately. And since he cannot pay $15 million, Sarah started, a grin matching mine forming on her lips. I can trigger a debt for equity swap. I finished. I can take the company. I can take everything. I sat back in my chair, feeling the shift in the universe. I was no longer the victim. I was no longer the wife waiting to be discarded. I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Draw up the papers. Sarah, I said, my voice steady and hard. He wants a divorce. Fine, I will give him one, but I am not just leaving with my freedom. I am leaving with his legacy. It will be a bloodbath, Sarah warned, though she sounded delighted. No, I corrected her. It will be a hostile takeover. Monday arrived with the subtlety of an executioner's axe. Marcus did not even have the decency to sit me down. He simply tossed a thick manila envelope onto the kitchen counter while I was pouring milk for Leo's cereal. He was adjusting his tie in the reflection of the microwave, refusing to look at me. I filed this morning, Marcus said, his voice devoid of any warmth. My lawyers will be in touch. Do not make this difficult. Elena, just sign where they tell you to sign. Before I could even reach for the envelope, the practicalities of his cruelty began to set in. When I went to pay for gas an hour later, the terminal flashed a bright red declined. I tried again. Declined. I checked my phone, only to find the service bars grayed out. When I returned home, the Wi-Fi was dead. He had severed every financial and communication lifeline I had, isolating me in the suburbs with a surgical precision. When he returned that evening, he did not apologize. He doubled down. He stood in the living room, looming over me while I folded laundry. I canceled the cards, he stated flatly. There is no point in you draining my resources any further. And regarding Leo, do not get comfortable. I am petitioning for full custody. I paused, a tiny sock in my hand. You are never home. Marcus, you cannot raise him. I can hire nannies, he scoffed, and the court will agree with me. You are unemployed. Elena, you have no income, no prospects, and my lawyers are preparing affidavits regarding your mental state. My mental state, I asked, keeping my voice dangerously calm. Postpartum depression, he said with a smirk. It is tragic, really. You never quite recovered after having him. You are unstable. I am doing this for Leo's safety. He was rewriting history, weaponizing a condition I never had to steal my son. I said nothing, which he interpreted as defeat. Later that afternoon, the landline, the only phone he hadn't thought to cut, rang. It was Patricia. Elena, dear, her voice slithered through the receiver. Marcus tells me you are being stubborn. Look, you are a sweet girl, but you are out of your depth. Take the settlement. $15,000 is a lot of money for someone of your background. Don't be greedy, or you will end up on the street. I hung up without a word. I opened my laptop, tethering it to a secure satellite hotspot I kept for emergencies, and logged onto social media. There it was. Isabella had posted a photo 10 minutes ago. She was standing on a balcony overlooking the city, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "New views, new beginnings. Finally, free of the baggage." The geotag was for the penthouse at the Spire, a property that had just sold for $3 million. That night, the humiliation peaked. Marcus invited 3 of his frat brother business partners over for drinks. They sat in the living room, their laughter booming through the floorboards while I read a bedtime story to Leo upstairs. I kissed my son's forehead, turned off his nightlight, and sat at the top of the stairs, listening. So she actually thinks she has a chance, one of his friends asked, ice clinking in a glass. Please? Marcus laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. The woman is clueless. I told her I cut the money off because of market volatility. She believed it. I have her thinking she is lucky I am not charging her rent. Once she signs that prenup waiver, which she will because she is scared. I am home free. Isabella is already picking out furniture for the new place. You are cold, man. The friend chuckled. I am a businessman. Marcus replied. Elena was a bad investment. Time to cut losses. I did not storm downstairs. I did not scream. I walked silently back to my craft room and locked the door. The anger that had been simmering in my gut cooled into a diamond-hard focus. I dialed Sarah. He is celebrating, I said into the phone. He thinks I am broken. Huh, perfect, Sarah replied. Let him get drunk. Let him get sloppy. I have the final papers ready. We are not just going for the divorce. Elena. We are executing the debt call option tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Make sure the process server is waiting in the lobby, I said. I want to see the look on his face when he realizes that the bad investment just bought his whole world. The conference table in Sarah's office was buried under a paper avalanche of incriminating evidence. We had everything laid out in neat, damning piles. There was the forensic trail of the $40,000 he had funneled to the jewelry store, the hotel receipts from Maui, and the chat logs where he discussed hiding assets. But the centerpiece of our strategy was a single, crisp document, the loan agreement between Ether Systems and Obsidian Capital. Sarah tapped the document with her pen, her face grim. Listen to me, Elena. Marcus is a narcissist. He will deny the affair even with the photos in his face. He will claim the embezzlement was a clerical error. If we give him an inch of wiggle room, he will snake his way out. This cannot be a negotiation. It has to be an execution. I nodded, feeling a cold calm settle over me. He won't wiggle out of this. He signed a personal guarantee on this debt. If the company goes under, he goes under. Before the storm hit, I had one priority left. I drove Leo to my parents' estate in the Hamptons. Marcus had never bothered to visit them there. He assumed they lived in a modest retirement condo in Florida because that fit his narrative of me. He had no idea they lived in a gated compound that made his luxury house look like a gardener's shed. Grandma and Grandpa are going to take you sailing, okay? I told Leo, hugging him tightly. He smelled of baby shampoo and innocence. I was doing this to ensure he never had to smell the stench of his father's desperation. As I drove back to the city, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. Do not try to be smart tomorrow. Sign the papers, and I will let you see Leo on weekends. Push me, and you will never see him again. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. He had crossed the final line. Threatening me was one thing. Using my son as a pawn was a death sentence. I pulled over to the side of the road and opened my laptop. It was time to rattle the cage. I logged into my encrypted email server under the alias EV and composed a message to Marcus's work email, marking it as high priority. Subject: urgent debt covenants and immediate solvency review. Mr. Thorne. Obsidian Capital has noted significant irregularities in Ether Systems' recent financial filings. We are exercising our right to an immediate audit of your liquidity. We have reason to believe you are in breach of contract. Expect a formal motion to recall the $15 million loan within 48 hours. Regards, E.V. I hit send and waited. 5 minutes later, my Intercept software showed Marcus frantically calling his CFO. I could practically hear the panic in his voice through the metadata. He thought it was just terrible luck, a cosmic coincidence that his biggest creditor was tightening the noose on the exact same week his wife was leaving him. He had no idea that the hand tightening the noose was wearing the wedding ring he had bought. The morning of the mediation, I woke up before the alarm. I stood before my closet, ignoring the floral dresses and soft cardigans Marcus preferred. I reached for a suit I had bought years ago and kept hidden. It was a deep navy blue, tailored to perfection, made of Italian wool that whispered power. It had no logos, No flashy branding, but to anyone who knew, it screamed authority. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, sharp knot. I applied my makeup sparingly, highlighting the steel in my eyes. Then, I looked at my left hand. The diamond ring Marcus had given me a rock he bragged about constantly felt heavy and suffocating. I slid it off my finger. The skin underneath was pale, but free. I placed the ring on the vanity table. Beside it, I left a sticky note. I picked up a pen and wrote 6 words, "Real value is not in the ring." I walked downstairs, my heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. I checked my briefcase one last time. Inside was not a plea for alimony, but the acquisition papers for a tech company. I was not going to a divorce settlement. I was going to a board meeting where I held 51% of the voting power. I stepped out into the cool Seattle morning, the air crisp and clean. Marcus was expecting a frightened housewife to walk through those doors. He was about to meet the new owner. The room fell into a silence so profound I could hear the hum of the hard drive in the corner. Mrs. Gable, a woman I assumed had seen everything in her 30 years of family law, actually stopped breathing for a moment. She blinked rapidly behind her thick glasses, tilting the page toward the light as if she suspected a printing error. Marcus was oblivious. He was tapping away on his phone under the table, undoubtedly sending a play-by-play to Isabella about how he was crushing me. He did not even look up when Mrs. Gable cleared her throat. It was a wet, shaky sound. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Sterling, I believe we need to adjust the settlement parameters." "Just read the numbers." "Gable," Marcus muttered, still looking at his screen. "0 assets, 0 income. Let us get to the signing." Mrs. Gable adjusted her glasses and looked at him with an expression that was part pity, part fear. Item 1. She read aloud. "Liquid assets. Personal investment portfolio held in blind trust. Current valuation $8,500,000. Composition blue chip stocks and municipal bonds." Marcus froze. His thumb hovered over his phone screen. Then, a bark of laughter erupted from his throat. He shook his head, looking at his lawyer with a grin. "Okay, very funny," Marcus said. "You have the wrong file, lady. Whose is that some Microsoft executive's wife? You are reading someone else's divorce papers. Elena has, well, she has a coupon for 20% off at the grocery store." He looked at me, expecting me to share in the joke of my own poverty. I just stared back, my face a mask of bored indifference. Mrs. Gable ignored him completely. She flipped the page, her hand shaking just enough to make the paper rattle. Item 2. Real estate holdings. 100% ownership of a vacation estate in Aspen, Colorado, free and clear. 3 commercial office buildings in downtown Seattle, currently leased to... She paused, squinting at the name. "Leased to major tech firms. Estimated total property value $42 million. The smile on Marcus's face did not just fade, it curdled. It twisted into something ugly and confused. He dropped his phone. It clattered loudly on the table. "Face up!" "Give me that!" Marcus snapped, lunging across the table. He did not wait for her to hand it over. He snatched the document from her hands, crumpling the edges. He scanned the pages, his eyes darting frantically back and forth. This is nonsense," he sputtered. "Sterling, look at this. It is a forgery. She typed this up to scare me." Mr. Sterling, however, was not laughing. He was leaning over Marcus's shoulder, reading the fine print. I watched the blood drain from his face as he spotted the stamps. "Marcus," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, "these are notarized. These are bank-certified statements from UBS and Chase Private Client. This looks legitimate." Marcus looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of panic and rage. "You," he stammered, pointing a shaking finger at my chest. "You have $40 million. Where, how you stole this. You have been skimming from me. You have been hiding a slush fund. He slammed his hand on the table. That is my money. You embezzled from the household accounts. I knew you were a leech, but a thief. I let out a soft, dry chuckle. It was the first sound I had made in 20 minutes. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, and looked him dead in the eye. Your money, I asked, my voice calm and smooth like polished glass. Marcus, please. Your annual salary would not even cover the landscaping maintenance fees for my Aspen property. You really think I could squeeze $40 million out of your grocery allowance? You flatter yourself. I sat back in my chair and gave Mrs. Gable a small, sharp nod. It was the signal to drop the guillotine. Mrs. Gable, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor. Please proceed to the section titled Business Interests and Equity. The mediator looked at the page, and I watched her throat work as she swallowed hard. The authority in the room had shifted entirely. She was no longer looking at a scorned wife. She was looking at a titan of industry. Her hands trembled visibly as she adjusted the document. Beneficial owner? Mrs. Gable read, her voice shaking with a reverence born of fear. Sole proprietor of Aurora Holdings and its associated venture capital subsidiaries. The name hit the room like a physical shockwave. Aurora Holdings. Marcus stopped breathing. His face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. He knew that name better than he knew his own son's birthday. Aurora Holdings was the faceless entity that had bailed out Ether Systems 2 years ago. Aurora, Marcus whispered, the word dragging out of him like a dying breath. No, you cannot be. I am. I interrupted him, enjoying the look of absolute horror dawning in his eyes. I am Aurora Holdings, Marcus, which means I hold the note on the $15 million bridge loan that keeps your company afloat. I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the table. Let me refresh your memory on the terms of that loan. There is a specific covenant in the contract, Clause 4B. It states that if the CEO engages in conduct detrimental to the company's reputation, such as a high-profile divorce scandal or financial impropriety, the lender has the right to accelerate the debt. Accelerate. Marcus choked out. You mean? I am calling in the loan, I said calmly. You owe me $15 million, payable immediately. We don't have that kind of cash, Marcus screamed, standing up so fast his chair flew backward and hit the wall. You know we don't. We are liquidity constrained until Q4. You are trying to bankrupt me. Mr. Sterling jumped in, desperate to salvage the sinking ship. Now, hold on, Mrs. Thorne. You cannot just activate that clause based on a divorce filing. That is vindictive litigation. We will argue that Marcus has done nothing to harm the financial standing of the company. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single red folder. I slid it across the table to Sterling. I am not activating it based on the divorce, I said. I am activating it based on embezzlement. Sterling opened the folder. Inside were the transaction records showing the transfer of company funds to the shell company used to buy the penthouse for Isabella. Using corporate capital to purchase residential real estate for a mistress is a felony, Mr. Sterling, I said coldly. And it is a definitive breach of the loan agreement. The default is valid. Sterling closed the folder. He looked at Marcus with disgust. He knew the game was over. Since Ether Systems cannot repay the $15 million, I continued, my voice relentless. I am exercising the convertibility option outlined in the default terms. I am converting the debt into equity. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. What? What does that mean? It means, I said, standing up slowly, that as of this moment, I am acquiring a 60% controlling stake in Ether Systems. You are no longer the majority shareholder. Marcus, you are a minority employee, and considering your performance, I am not sure how long you will keep even that position. Marcus collapsed back into his chair. He looked as if his strings had been cut. Sweat was pouring down his forehead, soaking the collar of his expensive Italian shirt. He looked from me to the papers and back again, his eyes wide and vacant. He was looking at me as if I were a monster that had just crawled out from under his bed. "You took my company," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I built that. I am Ether Systems." "You built a house of cards." I corrected him. "I just decided to stop holding it up." I walked around the table until I was standing right next to him. I leaned down, bringing my face close to his ear so he could hear every syllable of his defeat. "You called me a parasite," I whispered. "You told your friends I was a burden. Look at us now. Marcus, who is the one begging? Who is the one with nothing? Now, let us see who is truly living off of whose charity." Marcus did not just lose his composure, he disintegrated. The man who had walked into the room treating me like a stain on his lapel slid out of his chair and onto his knees. It was a pathetic display, clutching at the edge of the mahogany table as if it were a life raft in a violent sea. "Elena, please," Marcus begged, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. "You cannot do this. Ether is my life. It is everything I am. We can work this out. I can restructure the board. I can give you a seat. Just do not take it away from me." I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. "It is too late for board seats, Marcus." "It was Isabella," he blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in his haste to find a scapegoat. She seduced me, Elena. She got inside my head. She made me spend that money. I was weak, but I never stopped loving you. We can fix this. For Leo. Think about Leo. He needs his father and mother together." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen and pressed play. The recording from his little celebration with his friends filled the silent conference room. I have her thinking she is lucky I am not charging her rent. Once she signs that prenup waiver, I am home free. Isabella is already picking out furniture. The recording ended with the sound of his own cruel laughter. Marcus went silent, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. "Do not speak his name," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You wanted to steal my son to polish your public image. Now, you are going to sign a new agreement. Right now." I signaled Sarah, who pulled a fresh document from her briefcase. It was significantly thinner than the previous one. "The terms have changed," I announced. "You walk away with nothing. You transfer your remaining 40% equity to me to cover the outstanding debt and the embezzled funds. I get full physical and legal custody of Leo. You get supervised visitation every other weekend, provided you pass a drug test." I cannot sign that," Marcus stammered, tears streaming down his face. "I will be destitute. I will have nothing." Just then, his phone buzzed on the table. It was the only sound in the room. The screen lit up with a picture of Isabella. "Answer it," I commanded. "Put it on speaker." Marcus reached out with a trembling hand and tapped the icon. "Marcus!" Isabella's voice shrieked through the speaker, impatient and shrill. "What is taking so long? The realtor is here for the walkthrough of the penthouse, and the credit card you gave me for the deposit just got declined." "Fix it." Marcus looked at the phone, paralyzed. I leaned in toward the microphone. "Hello, Isabella," I said. "This is Elena. Elena." She scoffed. "Put Marcus on." "I do not have time for your drama." "Marcus cannot come to the phone right now because he is currently insolvent," I said, enjoying the weight of every word. "He has lost the company. He is bankrupt. And that penthouse. It was purchased with stolen corporate funds. The company which I now own is seizing it this afternoon. I suggest you leave before security arrives." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. Then the line went dead. No goodbye. No questions. She had cut him loose the second the money dried up. Marcus stared at the dark screen of his phone. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had lost his wife, his son, his company, his fortune, and the mistress he had destroyed his family for. He was hollowed out. "You have a choice, Marcus," Mr. Sterling said quietly, refusing to look his client in the eye. "If you do not sign this agreement, Mrs. Thorne has enough evidence of embezzlement and fraud to refer this to the district attorney. You are looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison." "Prison," Marcus whispered. "Sign the papers," Sterling advised, closing his briefcase. "It is the only way you stay a free man." The tip of the pen dug into the paper as Marcus signed his name. His hand was shaking so violently that the letters were jagged, barely legible scratches against the white page. A single tear escaped his eye and splattered onto the signature line, blurring the ink into a dark, messy smear. It was a stark, poetic contrast to the booming, arrogant laughter that had filled this room only an hour ago. He slumped back in his chair, a man who had been stripped down to the bone. I took the pen from his trembling fingers. My own hand was steady. I signed my name next to his, the strokes sharp, fluid, and final. It was the last time I would ever write my name on a document that bound me to him. I stood up and smoothed the lapels of my navy suit. I looked down at the man I had once vowed to spend my life with. The white-hot anger that had fueled me for months had evaporated, leaving behind only a hollow, quiet pity. He was not a monster anymore. He was just a small, broken man who had chased fool's gold and lost the diamond he was holding. "I never needed your money, Marcus," I said softly, my voice echoing in the silent room. "I have plenty of my own. I just needed a husband. But you were always too poor in character to afford that luxury." Marcus did not answer. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders heaving. I turned and walked out of the conference room without looking back. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was the only rhythm I needed. In the waiting lobby, Patricia was pacing back and forth, clutching her pearls. She looked up as I approached, her face a mask of anxiety. She was waiting for her son to emerge victorious, ready to sneer at me one last time. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to deliver one final insult about my background, but the look on my face stopped her cold. I did not scream at her. I did not gloat. I simply gave her a polite, curt nod, the kind a queen gives to a peasant, and kept walking. I would let Mr. Sterling explain to her that the commoner she despised now owned everything she cared about. I pushed through the heavy glass revolving doors and stepped onto the Seattle pavement. The gray drizzle that had plagued the city all morning had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing a rare, brilliant blue sky that felt like a personal benediction. The air tasted like rain and freedom. I pulled out my phone and dialed my father. He answered on the first ring. "It is done, Dad," I said, a smile finally breaking through my composure. "Tell Leo I am coming to get him. We are going to get ice cream." I got into my car and merged onto the highway. As I drove, I passed the gleaming glass tower of Ether Systems. The logo caught the sunlight, shining brightly against the skyline. Technically, that building, the employees inside, and the legacy it represented belonged to me now. I briefly considered what I would do with it. Maybe I would sell it for parts. Maybe I would restructure it and fire the entire board. Or maybe I would just let it sit there as a reminder. It did not matter. I drove past the exit without even glancing in the rearview mirror. My destination was a small preschool on the edge of town, where a little boy was waiting for his mother. Marcus was behind me, buried in the rubble of his own ego, trapped in the wreckage he had created with his own hands. But the road ahead of me was wide open, bathed in sunlight, and for the first time in years, I was driving it as myself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below and tell me where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Like this video and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.